welcome to Basic Folk, where we have honest conversations with folk musicians. I am guest host Lizzie No, and I'm here with Cindy Howes. What's up, Cindy?
Hello. Not too much is up.
That's a lie. You have something very, 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 very important that has happened, and I was sort of teeing it up for you to mention that, but since you refuse, I will break the news. Cindy has an amazing new puppy.
Wow. I didn't know that you did vocal runs, first of all.
I try to keep that under the surface because, you don't want to put it in people's faces too much. But when it comes to puppies, I give my all.
That's like my homosexuality. I don't want to put it in people's faces too much.
I mean, that's like your lifestyle, your sinful lifestyle that you've chosen.
And I do honestly, I do have agendas. I throw them out there. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes, it is true. Basic folk listener. I have gotten a puppy. My gay wife and I have gotten a puppy.
Congrats.
Thank you so much. She is 3 months old.
She's just a baby, Cindy. She's just a baby.
She is a tiny 34-pound baby. People are like, they look at this puppy and they're like, oh, this is going to be a big dog. And then they start the people just will talk about the feet. They're just like oven mitts, and they really are like oven mitts because you can hear her because she's like a puppy and she doesn't know how to do anything, so she's just clomping around, and it sounds like she's wearing wooden clogs because she doesn't know she has not great control over her feet. But we have named her Puddles Phyllis Howes Mohan.
It's a beautiful name. It's an historic name.
Yes, Puddles. She's the most fun, except she sleeps 27 hours a day.
That's actually the most fun part about her, to me personally.
I've been dying to get her to play with a puppy, and I can't find a puppy that matches her energy level. Because it's everybody's puppies are way too excited. Mm-hmm. And she's just
chilling.
She's just whoa, whoa.
Wow, a slow motion puppy. I'm so happy for you, Cindy.
Thanks. Yeah, I was playing with her the other day and I was I feel like this is the most fun I've ever had in my life.
It probably is.
I've never had a puppy before, and it's pretty fun so far. And I also really love how when there's a terrible thing that she does and that she keeps doing, I'll go to bed and be like, oh, this sucks. This dog eats our garden, and it's just this is going to be, our lives are terrible now. And then the next day I'll Google how to get your dog to stop eating your garden. I'm like, oh, there's tricks.
What are the tricks for that?
I have read that you can get a little fence, so our garden isn't very big, so you can get a tall fence posts to go around it. You order these $100 things on Amazon, you stick them in the ground. Another thing they suggest is to spray lemon juice on your garden because dogs do not like lemon. There are these things you can get that spray water if it senses heat or motion. Or you could do what I'd like to try to do. I haven't tried it yet. You can just use the garden hose. Psst, psst,
just
psst,
psst, pew, pew, gotcha.
Pew, pew.
Pew, pew.
Or I should get a super soaker.
That sounds very fun. That sounds a lot better, actually. Please access our GoFundMe right away to provide Cindy with super soakers.
Puppy super soaker. What's going on with you, Lizzie?
I've just gotten home from a little tour with Paisley Fields and Molly Abomsawin. It was so much fun. And I'm getting ready to go out to California, where I am playing on the Buddy Miller Cavalcade of Stars at Hardly Strictly Bluegrass, which is my favorite festival. When I was a college student, I used to go to this festival and look up at Emmylou Harris and Jason Isbell and Trampled by Turtles and be like, one day I will be a real musician and I will play at Hardly Strictly Bluegrass. And now it is happening in a matter of days, which is so unreal.
That's really cool. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. Ugh, I just can't wait.
I feel like now is a good opportunity for me to tell you how great you're doing. I don't know if you
Thank
feel
you.
like you're doing great, but like it seems
I sure
like
don't, Cindy.
yeah. Well, that I can relate to, but like let me just say that you are like it seems like every single time I talk to you, you're like, guess what? This huge thing is happening for me. And it really is like enough, you know, like all
I
of
think
these
you're
huge
right.
things that are happening.
That's why I need friends like you, because I am aware of those things and I'm grateful for them, and they sort of feel like they belong to someone else's life, like when I'm like playing Hardly Strictly or getting new music recorded. But then I look around at the piles of laundry in my home and all of the little tasks that I've left undone, and I'm like, you're not even a real grown-up, are you?
Well, do you want me to come over and do your laundry? Because I'm available.
I would love that.
All right. Also, the
See you in
other
a few.
thing I love to do is fix problems. So let me just think on that problem and try to fix it for you.
Cool. You let me know how I can become a grown-up adult.
All right, halfway into the intro, let's talk about how you can stay in touch with Basic Folk. You can sign up for our newsletter, which we send one time a month. You can sign up for that at basicfolk.com. Follow us on social media. We are not on TikTok, but we're on all the other ones at Basic Folk Pod. Lizzie is on TikTok. Ask Me About Imagine Dragons is her TikTok handle.
That is my TikTok handle.
You can also make a contribution to Basic Folk. We're listener supported. basicfolk.com/donate. We love you. Okay, let's talk about our guest today, Caleb Caudle.
Carolina Dreamboat Caleb Caudle is our guest this week. Caleb Caudle has lived a lot of his life on the road, and it is in his blood. His dad was a truck driver, and Caleb learned early on that making a living often meant long stretches of time, you know, in solitude away from home.
Man, I wonder if his dad ever listened to Garth Brooks or Alabama songs about driving trucks. You know me, I love a good country music song about a truck driver or a rodeo performer.
So do I. What's that one? The House That Peter Built? Classic song. So Caleb started out in a rock band called the Bayonets before he found his calling as a thoughtful alt-country singer-songwriter. When Caleb released his debut album, Red Bank Road, in 2007, he was not yet a full-time musician, kind of had one foot in, one foot out maybe, and was just beginning to realize what made his songwriting voice distinctive. His numerous releases since then have been a journey deeper and deeper into his own sound and into his own point of view. So Caleb has driven the hard road in music. He has released albums and toured relentlessly since 2007. Albums like Carolina Ghost and Better Hurry Up gained him a reputation as one of the Americana performers to watch in Nashville. As Caleb opened up about getting sober and being intentional about his legacy, his gifts as a songwriter continued to blossom. He recorded his latest release, Forsythia, at the Cash Cabin, kind of a dream recording spot for a lot of songwriters. And he brought in like a trusted group of collaborators, people that he'd been working with for years, because he wanted this album to be intimate and all about coming home. The imagery of Forsythia brings you home with him to North Carolina and home into himself. And he even came full circle with a new recording of the title track Red Bank Road from his debut 2007 album. One thing that became clear to me about Caleb in this interview is that he's someone that brings the past with him, like a lot of great Southern songwriters, but he's also challenging himself all the time to make something new with his life and with his art.
Well, let's take a listen to one of Caleb's new tracks before we get into this conversation. Really looking forward to hearing this one, Lizzie. This is the song I Don't Fit In from Caleb Caudle, and then we'll hear our conversation between Caleb and Lizzie on Basic Folk.
I don't fit in, not the way that's expected. There's a murder of crows, counting the bones they've collected. I don't fit in, not at all, not at all. I never minded following all the rules that were set for me, just so long as they all made sense and I could do just as I please. You can be yourself I was told it ain't worth the fight. That kept me up all night. I don't fit in, not the way that's expected. There's a murder.
Hi, Caleb.
Hey, Lizzie.
Thank you for joining us today. I have a lot of questions for you, so we're going to get right into it. So, was guitar your first instrument?
It actually wasn't. The first band that I played an instrument in, I played bass, and I had bought a bass from a pawn shop, and I didn't really know how to play. And so the guitar player in the band that I was in, it was just kind of a startup kind of garage band, and they were just like, play this note. And so I just did that, and then, I was kind of default singer because nobody wanted to be.
Oh my gosh, that's so funny. Was that the Bayonets?
No, it was long before that. It was a band called Dakota.
Caleb, I'm actually not going to ask you, and I don't want you to tell me how old you are, but you are the guest that I have had the most trouble figuring out your age, because you have done so many musical projects that I'm like, but you seem like a peer, and yet you have multiple bands like under your belt, so many albums. But like back to the beginning, who taught you to play guitar, and were there particular artists or bands that you wanted to sound like when you were like first starting to play?
Yeah, I taught myself. I traded the bass in because at the time I was maybe a little bit ahead of my years, and I figured out quickly that like bands are kind of a disaster, and if I wanted to like keep moving forward on my own like schedule, then I kind of needed to maybe go at it more alone. And so I traded my bass in, and I got a acoustic guitar, and it was right around that time where I started getting really into songwriting. My first influences were really like the Replacements and the Clash. And the Velvet Underground, Lou Reed, that was a big one for me, because I was like, whoa, he's singing about things that not everyone else is singing about. And so so then I started kind of getting into, all the early Dylan records, and, that kind of just led me back through everything. And so I have a really curious mind, and when I like see a thread, I usually chase it as back and, as far as it can go. And so from Dylan, I got really into like country music and like kind of outsider country music, like Graham Parsons, and like, Sweetheart of the Rodeo was a big record for me from the Byrds. And then I kind of just went from there, and I just saw like I just kind of started to see how everything was connected. So it was really fascinating to me. And I just kind of like, now I feel like I'm on this endless quest to just see how it all comes together and where it all comes from.
Yeah. So in those early days, you were just playing along to records and like trial and error, figuring out how to like kind of translate those melodies onto guitar.
Yeah, exactly. I was just doing it all by ear. My dad's mom played piano by ear in church, and so I always thought that was super interesting to just like hear something and then just kind of fiddle around until you come across, till it sounds good, basically. And so I've always kind of just like, if it sounds good, it is good.
Yeah, exactly. Like, I think it's a really interesting and intuitive way of learning music, kind of like you were saying in your band. It sounds like your bandmates were kind of just like calling out the notes. And it takes a little bit of confidence that like you're jumping into the deep end of the pool and figuring it out as you go.
Yeah, confidence or just like ignorance.
Sure.
I was just kind of like, this is really fun. I'll just do, this beat's getting cut from like the football team or something. So like, I'll just run with this for a while.
I wonder how many musicians, like especially in this Americana lane, are like people who had that choice in middle school. Like, am I going to go out for the band or am I going to go out for the football team? And like, that's where the roads diverged.
Yeah, I remember this one time, same pawn shop, but my mom kind of gave me the option. She's like, do you want a class ring or do you want like something musical? And I was like, I want a PA, that I can like carry to band practice and everything. And so It was really funny at the time because it was just like, you know, something that we would dread, like the PA, like showing up at a venue. If this PA belonged to a venue, we'd be like, no, this isn't going to work. But like at the time, that was just like the golden ticket. Like I was the guy with the PA. I could like bring it over and we could, you know, I could sing above the loud music. And that was really cool for me.
That says so much. In those early days, like having your own PA can be the difference between like playing an okay gig versus playing like a truly shitty gig. Because like, God bless all the years that all of us have had to tour with like the worst bar PAs in America.
Yeah.
It's like a rite of passage kind of.
Yeah, that and sleeping on couches. It's like the two things.
No, thank you. So you released your debut album, Red Bank Road, in 2007.
Yeah.
And then what I've read is that you didn't make the move to being a full-time musician until some time later. So can you kind of paint a picture of those in-between years where like you knew you were a songwriter, you knew you had something to say, but maybe you weren't ready to like have that infrastructure to tour full-time and call yourself like a professional musician? Like, how did you see yourself in those years, and what were you doing for work, and how are you spending your time?
So when we made Red Bank Road, it was like, you know, I mean, I was like so poor at the time. I just remember borrowing someone's car and driving to Johnson City, and we recorded it all in a day and a half at this like abandoned dairy barn. And I didn't know how to sing yet. I had maybe a couple good songs. Really, Red Bank Road was the only like really great song off that record. And it was a big turning point when I wrote that song, because it was kind of like, oh, like I have to write songs this good. I can't write them what I thought was good because this is like a new standard.
Right.
And so I remember feeling that. And at the time I was working at a pizza joint in Winston-Salem, and I was like a manager during the days. And then on the weekends, I was like weekend warrior kind of thing. Like I would go get in the van. So I'd work Monday through Friday and then get right off work. And then I would go play for 3 nights and then come right back and do it again. And developed a serious alcohol problem during those years, because I was just like, it was just nonstop. It just felt like that was part of the deal. And like that was just kind of part of the pay. But I do remember feeling like I got to a place where I was asking off of work so often that it almost felt like the need to kind of jump, but it was also a really scary jump. So like I sold everything I owned pretty much, except for my record collection and some clothes and like a pair of steer horns. And
oh my God.
I know. And I just remember putting everything into like a Ford Escape that I had at the time. And I booked myself 3 months of shows, and I put in my 2 weeks notice, and I was just like, I'm doing this thing and I'm going to fail and I'm going to figure it out.
Oh my God. I think a lot of people can relate to that leap, whether musical or not. And I want to send you a song, and maybe I'll link it in the show notes. My good friend Caroline Reese has this great song called I'm Not Selling the Telecaster. And it's about that exact moment where you like put it all on the line, but you choose like the 1 or 2 things that like you actually can't afford to part with.
Yeah. Yeah. For me, it was like clothing, records were a big thing. And then my brother had given me the steer horns for Christmas that Christmas before I put in my 2 weeks. So I was like, well, I can't get rid of these. I just got these. And they're amazing.
No. So have I read that your dad drove trucks for a living?
Yeah, that's right. So for like almost 30 years, he hauled cars. So if you see those trucks where it's like a ton of cars on them that are really scary, that's what he did. And then after that, he retired and he started working for Red Cross, driving the vans and going to like the blood drives and everything.
And so like, what have you learned from him about a life on the road?
I mean, really, it's hard work. You know, he just always set that, you know, example of just like working really hard. And so I've kind of just like adapted that. And, you know, and then I guess being on the road sort of like in my DNA now, where it's just like, it just felt normal, I guess. Like touring felt normal because he was always driving around for hours each day. And I just kind of felt like, well, that seems like a normal thing to do. But what I didn't consider was that like, that's only like a small part of my job, or, you know,
Right.
and you know, my job's changed so much just in the past 8 years, you know, with everything new that is required of independent artists to try to like compete with the heavies, you know.
Yeah, can you talk about that a little more? I mean, I know I can relate that, like, I think our generation of songwriters is at this interesting transition moment where, like, maybe when we started, it was enough to, like, have a record do well on iTunes.
Yeah.
And now there's this whole other branding and social media aspect. So, like, what's that transition been like for you?
I mean, it's interesting because in a big way, I think that everything is always pushed back on the artist, you know? Anytime there's something new to accomplish, rarely do you hear someone in the industry being like, oh, I got that. You know,
Right.
It's always like, oh,
Right.
We'll get the artist to do it, you know? And so, you know, constantly creating content for free seems, you know, at the very least distracting, and at the very most, it just feels like being exploited.
100%.
Yeah, and so it's interesting because you have to do those things because the end goal. But when I was first starting, like when I made that first record and I borrowed a car, and you know, I remember I ordered all these like blank cardboard CD cases, and my buddy, I went to my buddy's basement, we screen printed all of them, and we screen printed the actual CDs, and I burned all the CDs on, you know, like a computer, and I packaged them all, and like I remember like I sold like 34 CDs like in the first day that I put out that first record.
That is really good. I don't think I've ever sold 34 CDs in a single day. Like, you can play like a sold out show, and like if you sell 10 CDs, like that's a great night.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, you know, like I remember playing the album release show, and I remember like, you know, my friends and family showed up, and it was like, wow, I really felt a lot of support. And then there's like this transitional period of your career where it goes from, you know, it goes from being just friends and family, and then you start getting people you don't know, and then and then some of the friends kind of just stop coming, and then you're like, oh wait, and then at some point it's just like, oh, people are just here to hear the songs, they're not here for any other reason. And so that was a, you know, that's a big growing pain kind of thing, but also like a super interesting process.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I want to jump in a little bit to your album Carolina Ghost that came out in, was it 2016?
Yeah.
So I read this great profile on you in Bitter Southerner.
Yeah, Charles
where
Aaron
they compare
wrote that.
Charles Aaron, like I loved the way he wrote about your music and you as a person. And he compared that record to like early 80s Merle. And I thought that was kind of apt because it's glossy, but it's also soulful. And I'm curious what your sonic influences were going into that album cycle.
Early 80s Merle.
Well, there we go.
He just really nailed it. You know, and like, just like, I think I was, you know, I liked the production on those Merle records. But I think what I really loved was his songwriting during that time, because I felt like he was pulling from almost like a like Great American Songbook, you know. It felt like it was more in line with like the chords the Beatles were using, or like Randy Newman, or, you know, and it's like it felt more of that to me than anything else, and it felt really sensitive. And I've always been a really sensitive songwriter, as far as like I've never been like tough guy country, or like, you know, it's always been way more poetic. I've always, you know, tried to like speak from experience and just try to view the world around me. It's like I'm not like into like running anyone over or whatever they do in tough guy country. I don't know. It's just like I'm just disinterested.
It's very that. You're not the John Wayne country singer that makes millions in Nashville.
No, it's just I have no interest. That's a different world than the one that I want to create for my music and myself. So.
Well, is it true that Carolina Ghost was your first album that you created sober?
Yeah, that's true. That was the first one.
I'm so curious about not necessarily like all of the health and wellness benefits of like sobriety, of which we all know, like there are so many. But when I think about going into the studio, one of the biggest puzzles to tackle is to like figure out how to get in the zone, how to feel like your highest, most expressive self. And for a lot of us, you know, drugs and alcohol are one shortcut to get there. So did you feel like you had to create new inroads to like the zone once you were like starting to create sober?
Yeah, totally. Like if, you know, recently I had to like send a song list over to somebody, and I think I heard some tracks off of Carolina Ghost, and when I listen to them, it's like I can't help but hear like how insecure I was like as a vocalist, and like because I'd always relied on booze, I mean, to make me feel like comfortable enough to like go for it or whatever. And,
sure.
And whether going for it was good or not is, you know, completely subjective. But so like with Carolina Ghost, I was like hearing myself in a way that maybe I had never heard myself before, because there wasn't like the filter of like false confidence or whatever you want to call it. And so, yeah, that was really interesting, because I was like, oh, this is how I sound. I'm not sure I love how I sound. Like, this is going to be a process of just like constant refinement. And so that kind of started a whole new journey for me.
Yeah, I think you can hear it in your voice as you listen to the records year by year. And I think it's actually really amazing, because it still sounds like you, but there are changes to your vocal where there's like a lightness that I didn't hear on those early records. And Carolina Ghost seemed like a turning point for you.
Yeah, I think for a long time I was just trying not to sound bad. And then, you know what I mean? Like, it's
Who
like,
can relate?
like that was like the minimum, you know, I was just like selling myself short in a lot of ways. Like, but I think like when Carolina Ghost came out and I listened back to that, I was like, I think I'm on to something. Like, my new goal is not to sound it's not to sound just okay or whatever. Like, I want to be great. And like, how can I be great? And so I started trying to like, you know, at that point I was going through a huge change as far as like my listening habits. You know, for leading up into Carolina Ghost, it was like country music. Like that was it. And then after Carolina Ghost, it's like I felt like I made a straight ahead country record, and I was like, I don't want to do that again. Like, I feel like I've already done that. And so it just opened up everything. I mean, I just started listening to reggae, jazz, funk, like blues, and then I got as obsessed with all of those genres as I was with country music. And so it just completely changed me, because I was way more open to being influenced from outside of my genre, to the point where now I don't even like hear it as a genre when I'm writing or when I'm like recording. Like, I'm just doing whatever the hell I want, and that's just gonna have to be what it comes out to be, you know, because like,
Absolutely.
I gotta live with this, you know, and I got, you know, I'm trying to leave behind a trail of art, and I want it to be more rich than just like, I just don't want it to be limited by like, hey, this is like straight country music. Like, I feel like that's been done, and it's been done better than me, and I just don't really feel the need to like add to that canon.
That's really interesting. I think that I get a sense on quite a few of your albums that you're like very conscious of creating a legacy and like living with the past, but transforming it in some way. And I guess I'm thinking about, is the track White Dove's Wing? Is that the title, the name of it?
Yeah.
What does it mean to you now to grow old with grace?
That's a good question.
That's a lyric that I really like, that really stuck with me from that song.
Yeah, and you know, at the time it was like I was just about to get married, and I think I wrote that song from a place of like just like being kind of naive about it all. And I think it was more of like a hopeful line than anything, or it's truly what I felt, you know. I'm like, if I've written it, it's because I felt it in a moment. But to me now, like looking back, it probably means something way different now, you know, because I've just learned, you know, life will beat you up. And so now it kind of means just trying to find peace.
Simple as that. And difficult as that.
Yeah, it's simple as that.
I want to skip ahead somewhat, just because you have so many great songs and so many albums. I want to skip ahead to 2020. Better hurry up. And I want to start by focusing in on Reach Down, which to me is the most fascinating song on the album because it is sort of a political song. There's a little bit of that inspiring Oregon come together thing, but it's also an epistemological song that kind of has this angle of the rich and the poor live in separate worlds, and because of that have access to different kinds of knowledge. So for our listeners, like a key lyric for me was, I've seen them swinging from chandeliers, champagne corks in both their ears, wall built high just to drown the sound from the hopeless hearts in desperate town. Reach down. So in that context,
that's wordy,
where it's
man.
like, yeah, we're living worlds away. I think it's great. We're living worlds away based on class and where we're born and all of those things. What does it actually mean to reach down? And like, who were you writing that for? Who was the audience you had in mind?
Just anyone who's vulnerable, really. Anyone who's not afforded the same opportunities as you. So it could even be, even like at the time I felt like I still feel like I'm like a poor person, but
yeah.
I definitely live that way. I live like, I'm not like spendy or anything,
Yes.
But still, like, I feel like I still had, the opportunity to help people who were below me. And so I just think that there's just like tiers, right? And so
right.
I just feel like, it's sort of just our responsibility to just, if somebody doesn't have the same opportunity as you, to just help them if you can.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it was so timely. Like, did you have like the really like volcanic political atmosphere in mind when you released that? I mean, was there any trepidation with like putting out a song like that, like knowing what we'd gone through as a country in the past 5 years before 2020?
I mean, probably. I mean, even if it was just like subconsciously, I don't think there's no way to avoid it, right? So, but I definitely probably wrote that out of maybe anger or sadness, and usually those things kind of tend to get, tangled up together.
Oh, yeah. Not a lot of straight men are admitting that. Usually it's like just the anger. And I think to be a good songwriter, you have to figure out the overlap between anger and sadness. So
yeah,
hats off to you.
Well, they're so connected. I mean, and I kind of feel that way about almost everything. I feel like it's all sort of, everything means a little more than we think that it does. And, so I've just, I just pay attention as a songwriter. It's like the closer you can pay attention to details, I just think the better, because usually the more specific you're getting with something, it's like, weirdly enough, it becomes more universal at that point because everybody's like saying, oh, I identify with that in this way to my life. It's like each person takes from it what they want. And I think there's something really beautiful about that process.
I think you're right. I think people are really resistant to being talked at, but everybody likes to hear a specific story. And so like, I feel like the less you tell people how they're supposed to feel and the more you like paint a picture, the more successful you're going to be at like actually connecting with people.
Yeah. And in a little bit of a way, it's like you're allowing the listener to come to it on their own time. And I think that's another big part of the way people change in general. I think that, when people come to it by themselves, I think it's like true change versus when they're beat over the head with something, then they're like, oh, I guess I'll reluctantly change. I don't feel that change is like a sincere one. And so I kind of like it the other way around.
That's interesting. I'm really bad at taking advice. Are you that way too? Like, do you need to come to things independently for it to be real in your life?
Oh, yeah. 100%. I mean, and that comes from like just being like early age. Like I was just like always, like one of my first influences was like Joe Strummer from The Clash. And it was just like, question everything, you know, and like so like I just applied that, and I was just like, I'm not gonna listen to anybody, you know. I'm gonna
Right.
you know, I'm gonna figure it out myself, and I've always just had a curious mind like that. So yeah.
You know, that's interesting. I'm kind of connecting the dots as far as like, it sounds like you're not the type of artist that has like heroes that you like look up to whole cloth. Like you're going to make your own way. And I read in that Bitter Southerner profile that like Ryan Adams and Whiskeytown were an early influence. So like, what do you do with their legacy now? Like, are there still parts of their artistry that you take something from and get inspired from? Or was there a moment where you kind of had to be like, this is someone I maybe used to look up to, and then the path that they ended up taking, like, kind of changed their legacy for me? I know that's like a complex question, but like looking back, yeah, how do you deal?
Well, one, I got to break it down in like 3 different parts because it's pretty complex.
I agree. Yeah.
First being that I'm friends with Caitlin and Skillet, who are married, and they're in Whiskeytown, and they're fantastic people who I love.
Absolutely.
And you know, as far as like the legacy of that, it's weird, you know, when everything came out about Ryan, then like I haven't listened to him since. But I just think that you know, is kind of easy to do, and I don't want to sound like mean in this way, but like, there's a lot of people doing what he was doing better than he was doing it. And I just feel like I just gravitate towards their music anyways at this point. I think I had a lot of growing up to do probably, and I had a lot of like searching to do musically to find all of those people. But those people were important. Like Ryan and Whiskeytown were important to me growing up because they're from North Carolina, and there was like a big pool there. And there was a huge alt country scene in North Carolina. But like I always talk about like how cool Caitlin was to me, like early on, asking her questions. She would like, you know, always be good to me and like let me know like here's kind of what I think. But like I was also super into like Merge Records and Yep Rock. And there's a guy in Winston-Salem. His name's Jeffrey Dean Foster. He had a band called the Pine Tops, and that was like all equally important. And good news is that you know, he's not a dirtbag, so I can still like you know, like look to him as like somebody that was important to me in my like formative years. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting, like what do we do with that art that informed us when it becomes soured? I mean, I don't quite know what to do with it, so I just put it away.
Yeah. I think I'm really glad you're like willing to go there, because I think there are a lot of like very simple, convenient answers when it comes to an artist who's been revealed to like not have behaved ethically.
Right.
And there's the answer of like, cancel them, pretend they never existed. There's the like, just get over it. It's not the worst thing that could have happened. And then there's the middle ground where it's like, as artists, we were blessed by what they created.
Right.
And we probably have a ton of respect for the people around them that worked with them as well. So it's not just about one person. It's about a scene, and it's about a culture that like took something from this person, right? So I think it's really interesting to think about like, how do we let people influence us without like just giving them a free pass for bad behavior?
Yeah, I mean, and you know, honestly, he was also a gateway to a lot of music that ended up being like all-time kind of music for me. Like,
absolutely.
It was like, you know, I always talk about like Whiskeytown the same way I talk about like the Jayhawks or Uncle Tupelo, which is like,
I mean, amazing bands, absolutely amazing bands.
Right, like these were like gateway bands for me to figure out what country music, you know, could be, or you know, that kind of thing. So yeah, it was certainly interesting.
Okay, speaking of like legendary bands and artists that we still look up to today, how did your friendship with Elizabeth Cook come about?
That came through, I don't know exactly how it happened, but I remember I had, you know, we have a bunch of mutual friends. I think maybe Aaron Lee Tashin maybe introduced us. I can't quite remember. Just because it's been a while. That
sounds like him.
Yeah, and exactly.
But what's your collaborative dynamic like? You've worked. I love all of the duets that you've done over the years. Like, what's the dynamic like between the two of you as singers?
I almost got to take a different approach for this answer because, like, to me, like, she's like one of my favorite people ever in the world. So there's that. And then also, I think she is a wonderful singer who compliments me very well. And I think she has an ability when she's singing along with someone to really figure out, like, the energy of the song. So, like, if it's a song like Monte Carlo off Better Hurry Up, it's, like, kind of aggressive and, like, you know, full-bodied and, like, she's belting with me. But then, like, a song like Forsythia is so delicate and she's just, like, this perfect compliment. So I just think she has a really... She's, like, really good at, like, paying attention to what the artist is doing, and she just wants to compliment that.
Well, I do want to talk about Forsythia. It's your new album that's out in October. I'm so excited for people to hear this album, and I want everyone to know, like, the environment and the story that led into it. Can you talk to me about the Cash Cabin, and specifically the very special reverb chamber that they have over there?
Yeah, sure.
Paint us a picture.
Yeah, so the Cash Cabin was built by Johnny Cash in the late 70s, and it was kind of like his retreat. He would just go make music there, and at the time, before the new section was built on in the 90s, it was just the main room, which is now like the kitchen / drum room. But they all used to gather around a single microphone there, and it's right in front of, like, the fireplace. And if you've ever been out there, you know that everyone who records there signs the mantle of the fireplace. So it's like, you know, the first thing I saw was Mavis on the fireplace, and I was just like, oh, the pressure. But
oh my God. For those just listening who can't see us on Zoom, my jaw just hit the table. Yeah.
But yeah, you know, it was so cool. I started working out there because, speaking of the Jayhawks, my friend John Jackson is in the Jayhawks, and he also produced some records for, like, Ray Davies from the Kinks, where the Jayhawks would, like, back him up. And he was going to produce Better Hurry Up. He came and saw me at Rockwood in New York. And after the show...
I love Rockwood.
Yeah, me too. Shout out Rockwood. So he came and saw me, and I came up to the merch table afterwards, and he introduced himself, and he was like, hey, I'm in the Jayhawks. I was like, are you kidding me? Like, because I love the Jayhawks. And he was like, man, I'd love to hear whatever songs you're writing right now if you're interested in sharing some demos. And so finished the tour, got home, and I put together kind of like a bunch of demos that I had been working on for Better Hurry Up. And I sent everything over to him, and he was like, I'd totally be into producing this if you're interested. And, you know, I'd love to talk more. And so we met again, and we talked more, and we decided we were going to do the record. And we were kind of like bouncing ideas, like, should we do this studio, that studio, whatever. And he was like, you know, I worked out at the Cash Cabin for like a Loretta Lynn record and like maybe like a Willie record or something like that. And
just a few up and coming aspiring songwriters that I think I think they really have a future, those guys.
They'll get there one day. Yeah, but he was just like, you know, it's a really, really cozy kind of place, private studio. And I was like, sure, you know, I'd love to check it out. And so I went out there, and instantly I like walked in, and I was just like, this is it. Like, it's not stuffy. There's just, you know, amazing pictures of like Johnny and June everywhere, and like the incredible amount of just instruments. And they were like, yeah, and if you record here, you get to use like Johnny's pre-war Martin. I don't know if they offer that to everybody, so this is not an advertisement for that. So I just remember, I remember thinking at the time, I was just like, that's worth it alone to like record there. And so it was just a really special thing for me. And so through that, I met John Carter, and you know, and just everybody out there, Trey, you know, and John Carter's son Joseph, who's a great photographer, did a bunch of he did the cover shot for Forsythia. But yeah, I mean, it's just a really special place. The reverb chamber is amazing. So a couple cool things about it. Cowboy Jack designed it, which is really awesome. They have the reverb plate from the 1970s that the opera used in there. Wow. And then there's also, all right, I don't know if I'm supposed to be saying this, but there's also this tiny little piece of tile that is like from Abbey Road that is in the reverb chamber amongst the other tile. It's just like a tiny little piece of Abbey Road tile.
Oh my God. Okay, we can bleep that out later if it turns out to be like a secret that's under embargo.
Yeah, it might be scandalous. I don't know.
Yeah. So digging into Forsythia a little bit, I don't want to read into anything if it's not there, but I'm just going to like say some things and then you can say if I'm on to anything. So like you lived in Nashville. Nashville's really the country music capital of the world. Then you moved back to your home state of North Carolina. And on your new album, the lead track is called I Don't Fit In. So is there anything you'd like to comment about those possibly related facts?
I think those are probably really related. It's a little bit like like when Willie moved back to Texas and started doing his own thing, and I did feel pressure when I was in Nashville. By the way, I love Nashville, but I do feel pressure there to like not necessarily conform to a sound, but I was like, oh, here's some things that like everyone is kind of doing. Like, do I need to be doing those things? Mm-hmm. And I always kind of...
Can you give an example of something like, for people that are a little bit more outside of like, I mean, like, I feel like you and I are all like in the thick of it, of making Americana music. But for someone who might just be listening in, like, what's like a trope or like a sonic thing that they might recognize that's like very Nashville right now?
Okay.
I'm shady.
I'm going to say this without, I mean, I don't mean any offense at all, but to me, a lot of stuff sounds like Fleetwood Mac.
Yes.
And that was kind of like very much the vibe. And it was like, it almost has more to do with like soft rock than it has to do with roots music. And I think that I like really felt that. And I was like, but why are we not? Also, I don't hear the blues in much of like Americana. And I was like, honestly kind of offended by that because of the role that it plays.
100%. I'm thinking this is so much like, you have so much in common with legendary basic folk guest Adia Victoria.
Oh, cool.
Like, I feel like there's like a coalition of Americana artists who are like, the blues is everything. We need to get back to that. So carry on.
Yeah, and like I've always loved like country blues to me is like, it's like this thing that like I know it when I hear it, but it's like really hard for me to describe, but it feels that of the earth. It feels very like grounded, and it feels like it comes from a place of like just like deeper everything, like deeper joy, deeper sadness, like just it feels real. And I think I was just like trying to get there. And I think I'm still trying to get there. I think it's like it's like a constant process to like get further in it, like get deeper, blend it more, see what happens. And so, I don't know. I just kind of felt like, there was things that were missing from what was happening in the music scene at the time. And I just thought that I could go deeper with it. And which is really funny because then like I brought in these legends who are like, just knock it out in 3 takes kind of thing. But,
the greatest.
But like all the guys in my band, like Jerry, Sam, Fred, Dennis, like they are so like the depth of their playing is that of jazz musicians. It's like really heady. It's on a different level, and it just feels like there's no boundaries. Like they pull just as much from like Coltrane as they do from like whoever Pete Drake or whoever was like a legendary in the country music scene. So I just feel like I don't know, they really got what I was doing, and it just didn't feel like it was just like, let's just do this, man. Like, let's just make music, and like we don't have to talk about it. Like I'll just play the song once, and then you just do your thing, and like it just felt like really good.
That's interesting. My next question was going to be like reading the personnel on this record. These the players on this album are like the best around. Legends, like you said, like studio legends. And I was wondering, like, do you go to those people with arrangement ideas, or do you play them a demo on acoustic guitar and like do things live? Was there a rehearsal process where people were coming up with their parts? Like, can you walk us through what that looked like? How you went from like, I have this song written to I have a fully recorded track?
So with these guys, I mean, it's just way different. So there's no coaching. There's nothing like that. I would just sit in this rocking chair with a guitar, and I'd play the song down one time. They all just sat around with pieces of paper, and they would all make individual notes. We would go in, we would hit record. The first take was sometimes a keeper take, like without us having ever played the song together before.
Whoa.
And then
Which song or songs did that happen on?
Crazy Wayne's first take, everything.
That song
my vocal,
is
my
killer.
guitar, and everything. Like, that wasn't even going to be on the record. But then we went
Stop
in.
it.
Yeah, we went in, and it was just like, we were like, well, we got time to do one more. And so I was just like, well, I got this one called Crazy Wayne. It's kind of weird. There's only 2 chords, but it's kind of grooving. And like, I played it, and everybody was like, Jerry was just like, Crazy Wayne, that's hilarious. And so I was just like,
It's such a great story song. Where did that come from?
So that came from, do you know Brian Wright? The
No.
songwriter. He's from Waco, Texas. He has a thing called Cafe Rooster in Nashville, and he's just a great songwriter. And we were talking about old mechanics that we used to have, and like, yeah, I was like, yeah, my guy's name was Crazy Wayne, and he's like, man, he's like, you got to do something with that. And so I just kind of was like, well, I'll just tell the story, and it's like all true, and it's just crazy. I mean, literally, but yeah, it was
Literally Crazy Wayne.
he was a weird guy, but it's a cool song, and it's a lot of fun, and I love the way that Jerry and Sam kind of like trade off licks throughout like the whole thing, and it's like, it just kind of blew my mind hearing that back for the first time. I was just like, whoa, we're in it. Like, this is, I don't know what this is, but it feels funky, and it feels country, and it feels kind of bluesy, and it just felt like just like endless kind of possibility. Like, I love that.
I'm so curious, what was behind the decision to revisit Red Bank Road? What is it, like 15 years later? Like, that was a track off of your first album. And even just in this conversation, it's obvious that there's like a lot more soul and intention in your work now, but your early material still holds up. So like, was it a trip to re-record something that you'd written so many years before?
Yeah, I mean, it really was. So that's a song. So basically how that came about was I had written it for the first record, and I recorded it. I couldn't really sing at the time. I could barely play. It's just not a good...
Okay, I wouldn't say you couldn't sing, but
well,
you're a different singer than you were then.
I'm a different singer than I was then. And I just never had I just never considered it a great recording. And so, but I loved the song enough that I kept playing it live. And so when I stopped selling like CDs at the merch table of Red Bank Road, I was still playing that song live, and like, it just got such a response from people. They're like, man, that song Red Bank Road, what's it on? Like, I really want to get it. And so in the back of my head, I'd kind of always said, like, you know, if the time's right, I'll record that again. Like, I really want like a better recording of it. And I don't really do that with many songs, but that one felt really special, and it felt like it was like the first song that I ever wrote where I was like, okay, I could probably do songwriting forever, you know? And so it felt important, and I'd carried it with me for years and years. And then when we were going to make this record, like, I remember writing Forsythia, and I was like, man, this kind of feels like in line with some of the things that I was talking about for Red Bank Road. So it kind of felt like a full circle kind of moment for me. And I was like, you know, if I'm ever going to re-record this song, I should do it with Jerry Douglas and Sam Bush, because I might not ever get that opportunity again. So it was just sort of like, I just felt like the timing was right. And then when I heard it, I was like, oh, like, we weren't going to put it on the record. I was just going to record it and like release it as like a single, like a standalone thing. And so, but when I heard it back, I was like, that has to close the record. Like, and John Carter was like, that has to close the record. Like, you don't
Absolutely.
you don't have an option. It's like, you have to do that.
Yeah, it does feel like a return home.
Yeah.
The whole record, but especially that last song. And I was thinking about an album review that Adobe and Teardrops wrote, I think for Carolina Ghost. They talk about the Carolina-ness, like the quote Carolina-ness of your sound. What would you say is like the most Carolina thing about you as a performer and a recording artist, I guess?
I think it's just like for me, it's like the ability to like blaze my own trail. Like that's always been really important. And so I think that like, I don't know that North Carolina has a sound or like the Carolinas have a sound, but I think the Carolinas sound is like just being yourself and like, just like trying to pull from all your influences and put it, like blend it up and put it and like put your stamp on it. But I also do think that most people from the Carolinas sing really well. I just really like Carolina singers.
You should meet my grandmother, a great Carolina singer. You really only get it in church, but when you get to hear her sing, it's very special.
Where's she from?
Mount Olive.
Okay, cool.
Yeah. Hi, Grandma.
Hi,
Hello,
Grandma.
if you're listening. You gave me everything. Can you tell me about the making of the Forsythia music video? Shout out to Gabe Barretto, my dear friend. Like, did you have specific places in mind that you knew you had to include in that video?
Absolutely. So, a lot of those are what I would call like my sacred spots. So it's like, it's a trip that me and Lauren, my wife, we take often, which is like get on Highway 8 and go up to Floyd, Virginia, and then get on the Parkway there and then ride along till you get to Mabry Mill. And then past that is like Dalton Park. It's just some of my favorite places. And then the shots by the river are like, that's the river that ran behind the church where I got married with Lauren in this little tiny chapel that's like right in front of the river at Stone Mountain. And a lot of really sacred spots. And like part of me was a little weird about that because I was like, do I really want to like share this with everyone? But then I was like, man, this stuff is just like too good to like keep to myself. So it was really fun. Me and Gabe had a good time. It was a really beautiful day, and it just kind of felt like vacation.
Yeah. So you have a pretty extensive fall tour like coming up around this album release. So what's that going to look like? Are you taking a band with you? How are you thinking about translating this album, which was you can hear that it was created in a very particular time and place and with a very particular set of collaborators. So how are you feeling about translating that into a relatable live performance?
I feel really good. So like we played, basically I feel like my career is kind of going to be looked at as pre-pandemic, post-pandemic, because I feel like I'm a different artist coming out of the pandemic than I was going into it in a lot of ways. But really I had enough time to realize like, hey, where do you fit into the grand scheme of things? Like, what do you want this to be? How do you want your touring to look like? Like, just questions I never had time to like sit there and answer honestly, because I was touring, and it's like you're just trying to hang on basically, and when I came out of the pandemic I was like, you know what, I want to just focus on the songs. Like I want the spotlight to be on the songs because that's what I do best. And so I've got a really great upright bass player who plays with me live and sings harmony, and then I've got a mandolin covering Sam's parts, and then a dobro player covering Jerry's parts. And so we've been traveling as like 4-piece, sometimes a trio, just depending on kind of what the gig is. But I don't miss the drums, which is nice. And I just feel like my songs are in the front. And I think that pre-pandemic, I toured in bands that were a lot louder. And I think I've just really made everything quieter. And I've just kind of like, I've just shifted my focus. And I'm just having a lot of fun with it. And it's like something about electric guitars and drums stresses me out. And so not having those around live, I feel like so much more comfortable on stage. And I don't feel like vocally I'm having to fight a band anymore. I feel like I can just sing at like a normal volume like I would sing. And so like basically what I wanted to do is I was having so much fun playing these songs in my living room. And I wanted the stage to feel like a living room. Like I wanted it to be. So now when we rehearse, it's like there's no microphones, there's no pedals, there's no anything. It's just 4 acoustic instruments in my living room and just like having a good time. It's not fussy. It's like not stressful. It's just like, I can hear everything really well. I don't know. I like it.
Being able to hear everything is harder than you might think. Like, I feel like one of the weird open secrets of being a touring musician is that a lot of the time you cannot hear a goddamn thing. Like the audience will tell you if it was a good show and you didn't hear the show. You were just like trying to hang on.
Yeah, muscle memory.
I feel that way sometimes.
Yeah. I definitely felt like when you're in a louder setting or when the sound's just bad, it's kind of like you're working off of like reflex and muscle memory, and it's so distracting and you can never quite get into the moment that you want to get in, which is the moment of not thinking. Because if you're thinking about, hey, it doesn't sound good up here, then you're not losing yourself in the music. And I think that's the whole goal. So
100%.
So it's kind of tricky. And so I was like, well, I can't control everything, but I can control stage volume. And so I just feel like this is it's like a really good musical bed for my songs.
Okay, so which song off of Forsythia are you most excited to play on your fall tour?
Maybe I Don't Fit In, I think, because I know we talked about it a little bit earlier, but I think that song is really cool for me because it's like when I wrote that song and the verses were completely different and I rewrote all the verses. And so at first the song like the chorus was the same, but like the verses felt really whiny. Like it was like, oh, woe is me, I don't fit in, like I'll never, like I don't belong anywhere. And then at a certain point during the pandemic, like a switch just kind of flipped and I was like, whoa, like I don't fit in, and that's amazing. Like there's like a ton of power that comes with that. And so I rewrote the verses from a place of power, and like it just feels kind of like an anthem to me, as close as an anthem as I can get. I think I'm just really excited to play that one. And it's got a cool groove to it.
Nice. Okay, are you willing to do a brief, I think 9 or 10 question lightning round? The rules are just like shoot from the hip, don't think about it too hard. You can pass on a question, but you can't ask for clarification.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, you got it. This is Caleb Caudle doing the Basic Folk Lightning Round. Who is one musical artist from North Carolina that everybody on earth should listen to?
Doc Watson.
Twizzlers or Red Vines?
Twizzlers.
Who is your celebrity crush?
I don't know. I don't. Kill your heroes.
Okay, great. Love it. What is your favorite music venue to play?
I'm going to say the Garage. Rest in peace, Winston-Salem, North Carolina.
What is one music venue that you dream of playing someday? Bucket list venue.
I guess the Ryman.
What is your deepest fear?
Never knowing what success means to me.
Summer Olympics or Winter Olympics?
Winter.
What is one song you wish you had written?
Hickory Wind.
What is the best time of day to write a song?
Mornings.
Caleb, thank you so much for being a guest on Basic Folk. Everybody go out and get Forsythia October 7th, is that right?
That's right.
It is a great record from a great, great songwriter. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
This episode of Basic Folk was produced by me, Cindy Howes. Alex Stanton composes our music. Basic Folk is on the Bluegrass Situation Podcast Network. You can find all of our episodes there, wherever you get podcasts. You can search for us on the SiriusXM app under Basic Folk, or you can go to our website, basicfolk.com. And we'll talk to you next time. Thank you so much for listening. Bye.
Bye.
I love that.